he come back and was helping over on the farm. And so, but Art had railroaded down in Klamath Falls when we lived down there. So one day he thought, let Wayne and Daddy take it over, and he come down and put his name on the railroad and got a job right now. So anyway, that's how Wayne and Daddy really went real big. But they milked the cows, and it went into these big tanks. They couldn't sell milk anymore. They had these big tanks, and the truck come in every day or every other day and would load that milk up and take it. That's how they ended up with the dairy. And that they were doing that until Wayne and Betty were killed. They were doing that. And of course, Alan was going to take over. Well, Alan didn't know whether he was, I don't know what, he'd sleep in, and the old cows would be out there bawling their head off, and Daddy would be about crazy, you know. Those cows, they want to be milked. And the neighbor, Fred Leonard, he was having a fit. But anyway, they just had to sell. That's all. They just had to sell out. Alan always felt kind of bitter, but Alan just wasn't with it then. Him and Verona had gotten married, and they had Gabe, but he just wasn't with it like he should be. Well, that was the way that, and let's see, your grandma and grandpa Wayne, I so tickled. Wayne met Betty, and she was in Baker. He lived in Baker. And when he met Betty, that was it. He was going to have Betty come hell or high water. And, of course, Betty had 2 brothers, and she was the only girl. Wayne would go over to Baker about every weekend to see Betty. And one time he come back, and I'll tell you, he just looked terrible. And Betty told him they was going to break up. They broke up for some reason. And Wayne, he went in the bathroom, and we heard something, and he passed out in the bathroom, and he had had a bleeding ulcer. And so we got him up to the hospital. Mom says, "How long have you been doing this?" And he said, "Well, I don't know, I just haven't been feeling good," and never did tell us. They got him up to the hospital, and Goss's Garage sent all their men up to give transfusions to Wayne. And of course, when Betty heard about that, boy, she was here. She was here in a hurry. And then it wasn't long till they got married. We got Wayne out of there, and about that same time, I had Lana, and she had a almost a ruptured appendix. Had both of them in the hospital at the same time. I was up to the hospital with Wayne, and I went home, and Lana was laying on the blanket out in the yard, and William was there, and she was so sick. So I grabbed her and took her right up to the hospital, and they took a blood test, and they operated right away, and they said they no more got that appendix out of there, and it just exploded. So anyway, that's how Betty and Wayne got together. And we had a little chicken house out there in the back, and they fixed that all up, and Wayne and Betty lived in that for a while, and they had it fixed cute. Well, then they moved that over there where they had their house, they moved that, and Wayne fixed a nice house over there and everything. And they lived there. Well, they were living there when they were killed. And, yeah. And of course, Daddy wasn't a bit good, and Mom wasn't that good either. And, of course, me, I just went along. I used to go out with Daddy in the mornings. Especially in the summer. Daddy and I'd get up about 3 o'clock and deliver milk. So the people would have their milk before they went to work, and it wasn't going to get sour on them. And at the first time, Daddy had a team. Doc and Coley was their name. And we had this little wagon that we'd put the milk in. And I would take one side of the road, and Daddy would take the other. The horses would let us off at that intersection, and they would go up to the next intersection, and they'd wait until Daddy and I got there. I delivered. That's what's wrong with me today. It's all that heavy lifting. I'd jump off of that car, and with 6 bottles here and 6 bottles here, and that's how I'd go down, delivered. My Daddy done the same. And then I would go home, and a lot of times I had to go help Mom. She'd always cook for the men. And then as soon as I got through helping Mom, I went out and rode the horse and rode the derrick. They used the derrick to put the hay in a haystack. And I done that a lot too. That was a big job. But I was more or less my dad's boy until Wayne got old enough. And then of course I met Art in, oh dear me. Well, this guy was working for Daddy, and Daddy and, I don't know what's that. Anyway, he was working, and he got mad, and he quit, and he went out to this other big dairy, and he met Art, and he come in and he says, Ella, I'm going to bring a guy in, and I just know you're going to like him, and I know he's going to like you. And by golly, he brought him in, and I met him, and we talked. Well, about that time, this woman that they were working out there at that big dairy, they needed somebody to help in the kitchen, so I applied, and she hired me. And Art would take and herd the cows until about 2 o'clock, and then he'd come in and eat, and a lot of times I'd sit there and eat with him, That's how we got acquainted, and then he left here, went to Salem for a little while, but we kept riding back and forth. And this guy that he went with, he went on over to the coast and was working for a dairy over there. And so at that, Art came up on a Christmas to see me. And a couple of days, I think a day or night before Art was to get there, Daddy come down with appendicitis, and we had to rush him to the hospital, and he was, they had to operate on Dad. So when Art came in, then my Uncle Dewey was helping milking with Wayne. Wayne was helping. And boy, Art, they just jumped in. Art just helped until Daddy got out, and he got a week's vacation out of it. And then he asked me to marry him and got me a ring. And so anyway, we planned on getting married in June, and Art was going to go back to Nebraska for a month, stay in Nebraska. And then he had this job on the coast that he could come back to. Jobs wasn't that plentiful then. So anyway, he got clear back to Nebraska, and then he called me and he says, if I take that job, I've got to take it right away And he says, I'll come back through by train and stop. You think we can get married then? But we're just going to get married we had a double wedding. So Gene and I, we got all our stuff all ready. And Mom and Dad and Jean's sister and her husband, we all went to Walla Walla. And we got married. And then ours had to leave the next day to go down there to protect that darn job. So they had a shower for me. And then I got on the bus and went down there too. But boy, I didn't like that Toledo. It was a big mountain with the city in the and it was terrible. And we lived way up on top of the hill, no car. And every time I'd go down, I'd have to carry the groceries up. Art would help me a lot of times when he could. That boy. And so Daddy, he just begged us to come home. At that time, Wayne decided he didn't want to be in the dairy very much. And he told Art, he says, you come home, you can have my part. I don't want it. So that's how my childhood, I worked hard. Anybody works with dairy knows it is